and of course, Michael Anderle. And I'll say that because Michael won't. It started, you don't just make change because you work hard. You have to be a visionary. And what Michael saw when he started writing, he saw the opportunity, not just for himself, but for the others. As people joined him, it's the rising tide. He lifted everybody up. Very generous, as well as a good, has a great grasp of how the readers look at the books and the stories. So that's what he shared with all of us. We started writing and he's like, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then you get in that mindset and the readers come because they like the story. It's a good story. And that's the vision that he's helped us with. And we've put together a pretty good gig, well over 100 books now.
Yeah. Is this on? Can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, excellent. First, again, thank you everyone for showing up and doing this. And I know that there's a lot of collaboration questions. It was kind of brought to my attention when we were at Meet. And someone had asked me the question, what is it like to have created a new change in indie publishing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so they were talking about the collaboration and how everyone was doing it. And I've been a little bit out of touch, if you will, by doing the 100 plus books that we've got out. Out of those 109 books, 29 are mine, and then the rest of them are collaborations. So we've structured some things, and we've learned things through time, including when I had my first set of 21 books that I'm still struggling. And it feels like what was said just a minute ago about it's like I'm going to have this story till the end of my existence. And so what happened is in November timeframe of last year, Justin Sloan, who had to fly back, reached out to me and he said, hey, would you be willing to do a collaboration? And the reason that happened is Michael Scott Earl talked to him and said, hey, you should just ask him. And then so that started the second phase of collaborations for me, where I had originally worked with Paul C. Middleton as my first collaborator. And then the second one was I was thinking, how was I going to hack success here in 2017, and how was I going to help people as well? 2016 was the macro, the large, 20 books to 50K, which at the time, at the end of December of last year, we were just attaining 2,000 members. So if you're new, you realize that we're like at 13 or 14,000 members. So there was a lot of things going on there, but in this year I wanted to see what could I do at the individual level. From people that had either success or had no books or whatever was going on there, and then find out, was there anything I was doing differently that I could share with the story structure or story empathy or the emotions that could actually help them as well. And I wanted to see what would happen. And so we had Justin, and then, so Justin reached out to me, but I realized the fans were asking for different stories that were within the universe. And so some people are like, well, how can I build a universe? And I have to admit, at the time, I already had an existing very successful universe, and I was plugging in pieces where the fans were asking questions. So that would be the first takeaway for anyone who's got stories where they're asking, what about this character? What about that thing that happened? And if you can't write it, you have an opportunity. And so for my opportunity that was coming up, I knew there was a large gap of time, and it was going to be a post-apocalyptic situation. And so I reached out to Craig at that time, whom I knew through the 20 books. So I already knew him and knew what was going on, so I was able to reach out to him. And then Chris and Lee had me on their podcast, and they were, I listened to what was going on, the Part-Time Writers podcast. I loved a lot of I loved their the emotions that they went through, the things that they talked about, how honest they were until they were talking about me. Then it wasn't so much fun. But what happened is I just asked them, I said, hey, what is your mountain? Because in my mind, there are approximately 4 different mountains that go on in our industry, one of which is getting into a bookstore is kind of a mountain. Getting a literary prize is kind of a mountain. And then for me, personally, my mountain was having happy readers who paid me money to be able to do this, and they reread my books and enjoyed the characters. And so I asked them, because it's like, hey guys, we all talk about your literary aspirations and the things that y'all love, and then you talk about writing these superhero pulp fiction, and they really don't match. These two mountains are not congruent. And so Chris ended up reaching out to me a little bit later, December of last year, January, and he said, hey, what do you think about us coming into the Arthurian Gambit? And I said, hey, I'm all about it. Let's talk about this. because there's this new age of what I'm seeing in the universe and the timeline. And so what we built was something where instead of looking at it from a standpoint of this is linear, which is getting us a little bit in trouble at the moment, but this is linear, we actually jumped ahead 400 or 500 years on the timeline and built out an area over there called the Age of Magic inside of Earth. And then we have an area in space, approximately the same timeline, called the Age of Expansion, which Craig is actually responsible for. And then during last year, I'm listening to podcasts like many of you, and someone is talking about how they're coming down to the end of their first successful series. What am I going to write next? And I'm worrying about the same thing, as I'm looking at the end of Bethany Ann at that time, or the fact that I didn't want to write more Bethany Ann. It wasn't so much that the fans couldn't read it, I was getting tired. And it's not so much, to a degree it was burnt out, but the reality was I just wanted a different mental break and going into something else creatively. But I knew the challenges of doing that, and so I didn't want to break off from Bethany Ann to go play over here because it was going to crush all the momentum that we had. And so I reached out to Martelle, Carr, whom I knew from an event back in last year in Austin, and I said, hey, I'd like to start this urban fantasy world. And I'd like to do it based on a lot of what I knew from my experience with the Cartherian Gambit, and I'm going to invest heavily in it. And what that really meant was I'm going to lose a lot of money in order to learn what I didn't know even before I met Martha. So I learned a lot of things related to art, and still learned a lot of things related to art and going on. But what we helped create over the months was a new universe from scratch that has been successful and is on a very upward climb. So I was able to do it Cartherian Gambit, which is kind of that first out of the gate. You don't know if you can do it again in your sophomore effort. And now Orisarin is growing well, and what I'm told is a very competitive market. And we're building that stuff going up. So we have kind of both of those experiences. But if someone were to ask me, well, what do I need to do? Sometimes I'm going to have to say, I don't know, because I don't know your situation. I had the ability to drop $25,000 on a new universe and say, we're going to build this thing. And it's like, hey, we want a better website. We're going to invest in that, because I'm looking 12 months, 18, 24, 36 months down the line, where are we going to be? And so I was talking to one person a little bit earlier, or a couple of days ago, when they were talking, and he was like, I'd really love to do what you're doing. And so I typed you back. I'm like, well, what do you have to offer them? If you have a universe, you have people, fans, then what are you going to offer the individuals coming to you? Because you need to think of it as a publisher. Even though you're the creator, you have to think of it as a publisher. And I got to explain that I think there are three types of individuals. You have authors who publish, which many of you are. You have publishers who write, which is what I am. And you have people who kind of struggle in between them. If you're not a publisher who writes, or at least that one that's in the middle, think hard, because this opportunity can wreck you. Because you're going to have to start dealing with other people and what their opinions are, what they want to do creatively, and that's where publishers hat. So anyway, I will let Craig, let's see who's going to go first. Craig, you're going to go because you started the process with just, first you were a collaborator in the Second Dark Ages, and then you started and said, hey, what about this Age of Expansion? Would you be willing to take this over?
Okay, we did the age. It was a gap of 150 years that we needed to cover. It was initially a 4-book arc. 3 books in, I covered 5 years. So it became a 10-book arc, and 750,000 words later, we finished that. But then the fans, it was supposed to end. That character, that whole thing was supposed to wrap up. But because of Michael's help and developing the emotion with the characters, the readership grew and grew. We kept selling book 1 and keep selling. It's the bestseller to this day. And they keep reading through, so great read-through. That means the readers are emotionally invested in the characters. So needless to say, if you see in the newsletter, you'll see that Michael had said, we'll kill them off at 150 years. To just make sure they get enhanced enough to live that long, that we didn't, and moved into something which is my favorite area, which is space opera. So we talked about it, and there we are. But space is such a huge place, we can't be constrained with just one storyline. And that opened things up. So we talked about that. We brought some more people in, and there's almost an unlimited amount of space there. We've got different storylines, space opera, military sci-fi, Boston legal / expanse kind of look at things, and it's wide open. the sky is the limit, literally, with this area. So we have, what do we come up with, 11 collaborators working just within the Age of Expansion. And I don't see a problem with making that 20 as we grow. We're in a 6-month hiatus because we need to get these stories set up and online. We're building them in such a way that we want a massive rollout. So the 3 stories, the first set of collaborators, we have the second story in the can already, and we haven't published the first one. And this is Michael Anderle. Hey, as soon as the story's done, 4 days later, you're publishing, goddammit. But we're sitting on this first book because what we're going to do is we're going to publish the first book. 18 to 21 days later, we're going to publish the second book, and then 18 to 21 days after that, we're going to publish the third book in each of these 3 series. So we're going to hit the market hard, very hard. As soon as that third book comes out, first book will get very, very heavy marketing. So in addition to the orgasmic sales, I will pick up the marketed sales, because space opera is a huge, huge genre. It's actually much bigger than the initial genre we wrote. Post-apocalyptic is really cool, but it's not a huge genre. It's not like space opera, because you look at writers like David Webb, 100,000 readers, maybe even 500,000. How do we tap into that? And that's where we're going. We tap into it with great stories, hitting quickly, and then some good marketing campaigns. So that's the vision, and that's what Michael talked about. You can't just look at today. We have all custom covers, so a fairly significant investment up front, but 10 months from now, when there's about 40 books published in this area, then that's when you get your maximum monetization. That's when you make your most money, because your covers at that point are costing $150, $200 is all, because you've already paid for the custom photo shoot, for the custom setup, you already have your brand established. So that's, when you're playing for the long term, that's when you win. And that's what we're looking at.
Appreciate it. So one thing I'm going to ask you, Chris, on the next one is talk about branding, because Craig talked about it a little bit in the Age of Expansion, but really you guys said it in the Rise of Magic, in the Age of Magic. Can you speak to that a little bit about onboarding but also the branding across what y'all wanted to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. It's great to be here with you all, and so honored to be on this panel and be working with Michael and his crew. Lee Barbant, right back here. Yeah, wave everybody, Lee. He's too shy to be on stage, but Lee is my primary collaborator. We've been working together for 2 years now, and we came on, like Michael said, in January to work on this new little sandbox called the Age of Magic, and we didn't know how quickly the sandbox would grow. We currently have 7 different series in the Age of Magic, and we're now starting to roll out what's called the Age of Madness as well, which will be kind of Cthulhian zombie tales, which will come before the Age of Magic. The branding question is a good one, because one thing that we started to do from the beginning, as we started to collaborate with folks like Justin Sloan, P.T. Hilton, Brandon Barr, and others, is that we started to think about, hey, how do we take this fantasy world and really knit it together so that when people outside of the Cthulhian world are looking at our books, they'll understand that this is like a massive growing world. So there's this little series that I grew up on. Anybody ever hear of Dragonlance? Yeah, a few of you. Dragonlance, I think they have about 186 books in the Dragonlance universe. It's enormous. And I grew up on those books largely because I loved the idea as a junior high kid, who just loved to read. And I grew up on those books because I knew I could read them forever. So one of the things that we decided is that as we started to brand the Age of Magic, we wanted to kind of brand this Dragonlance kind of feel, this growing universe, that readers would be able to read and read and read and fall in love with this world, and they would expect that more books would be coming. So the thing that the Age of Magic does is, first of all, we have a logo that almost looks like a Dragonlance logo on the cover of all of our books, trying to bind them together. We're trying to brand them in such a way that all of the series are written pretty closely to one another, which allows for crossovers between characters, which our readers are loving geographically. And then we're really doing we're really trying to keep it tight both with Facebook, website use, and also newsletters. So that's kind of the branding piece that we've been working on, trying to get that tight.
All right. And then Martha, I'm going to ask you. So Martha, 30 years traditional published, and had come out and she had tried the rapid release that we had talked about last year. Now, a couple of things that were different is I don't know Thriller, and did not realize, of course, that Thriller doesn't like a series where you don't solve the answer in every single book. So with that, that was a glorious opportunity to learn a lot, which translates to it didn't work very well. But within that, I got a chance to understand Martha because she was doing all of this on her own and just asking me questions. And then through these discussions and through understanding each other, I got an appreciation of what she liked to do. And so whenever it was time for me to think, well, maybe I might want some other playground that I'd like to play in, I reached out to Martha and said, hey, would you be willing to create this little series? That was my first thought. We were creating this little bitty series so I would have a chance if I wanted to play outside pure theory, and it would be there for me already. I wouldn't have to create something from scratch.
You used the word universe when you talked to me.
I said series, she heard universe. Maybe I thought series and said universe, but really what did happen is, I'll let you take it from there.
So, how many people here saw the podcast with Stephen Campbell that I did about the first draft release? So every time somebody walks up to me, they say, I know you from Stephen Campbell's podcast. And that was the first series, and as he said, it didn't go as expected. And so then we started this new series, and we took what we learned, and I made a decision to be willing to do whatever Michael wanted to do and not try to overlay it with my big ideas, because he had already done this successfully. And that really was the turning point for me, because after 30 years of writing, I had to learn to let go of the traditional rules and break them. And I actually ended up having more fun. And such as character development, breaking up plot with scenes that have nothing to do with the plot. And using topical references from last week with the Kardashians. And the readers adore it. And I let go of this idea of the way it ought to look and started paying attention to what the readers want. And it was a huge difference. And we told each other that we wouldn't invite other writers in until about 4 months after we started talking about this. And 2 weeks later, Michael called and said, I already invited somebody. So I said, I got someone too. And 2 weeks after that, he did it again. And I said, I got a second one. So we actually were talking to 4 authors about a world of urban fantasy, and they agreed to go with us. And all we could talk about was the idea of these 2 worlds. Orosaren is another dimension, and every 23,800 years? 25,800 years, they come together and these gates open and the magic from Orosaren flows back to Earth. And the last time it happened, a lot of people beings from Orosaren stayed on Earth, so we also had that. And they can open temporary portals that are illegal to go back and forth. And we started with a thriller aspect where somebody on Orosaren was killed, and they needed this Austin, Texas homicide detective to help them solve it. So he was playing to my strengths, which is one of Michael's greatest qualities, is you will walk away suddenly seeing your own potential that you had missed before. And he will generously guide you along. And, so the Lyric Chronicles was, we published the first book 1 year to the day after we met at the speech he gave in Austin, where there were 90 writers and only 3 of us stayed to ask him questions. And only 1 kept in touch. Guess who the 1 was? And so we published that first book and it took off immediately. And we have this swearing troll, which, can I say?
Swearing?
So swearing comes naturally to me as well. Michael didn't put that in the book, that was me. And so he taught me how to teach others to build their own storylines. So they included these ideas of character, 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 and also keep it simple, because coming from the traditional world, it's not as easy to talk to other authors and find out how they're marketing, and standard publishers don't do much for you. So we were always shooting in the dark, spending a lot of money, not getting a lot of results. And he keeps it very simple with great results. So I was thrilled to follow. So all I did was follow right behind him and work as hard as I could, and stayed open to constant change. I have never hit a level where I thought, okay, we got a pattern now, I can do this. Because the second I do, he has another idea. I say, great, let's go. And everything changes. And so now we have,
I was going to add two things that are kind of relevant. So inside this universe, we just talked about Earth was urban fantasy, whereas Saren was fantasy. As a universe director, expect all of the individuals that you're going to be having to go to the area you're not expecting them to be in. So I'm thinking to myself, we have this urban fantasy because that's what I wanted to write. And then so we go in here, and of course Martha does the urban fantasy, so I think we're on track. And then we have like S.M. Boyce and Serenaki and Flint Maxwell.
And Knorr.
Yes, and Abs. And so what happened is almost all of them went to the fantasy side. And I'm like, whoa. Where'd all this fantasy stuff come from? So expect the people, if you open up your universe, to be excited about an area maybe you're not excited about, or think that this is where it's going to go, and you need to be there to help grow them and fertilize and everything else and make sure that it happens. And the other part I'd like to mention is Ellie Barbant and Chris Raymond are both university professors. They understand how to teach. Craig has done a bunch of his own anthologies. He understands how to teach and to edit. And then Martha's got 30 years, and she is an editor as well, and she understands how to express what's different. And if you look at the congruency among all the individuals that are here that are actually running these things, look at their skill sets and look at your own skill set and go, do I have this? Can I learn this? Can I express this? And that's going to be very important, because even at that level, that's the same thing I did, which is, as a reader, I knew what I liked. And I was able to express, my fans like what I write. Let's not get that far off from that emotionally. Does that make sense? Because here's my biggest concern about a lot of what's going on in the collaboration front. And that is, and I was speaking to Johnny B. Truant, if you know him, at breakfast in Austin one time. And I heard about what was going on with some of the different collaborations in the worlds and everything else. And I'm like, that's fantastic that you have a 20,000-year timeline. Go for it. But let me express what, as a reader, would happen to me if I come into your universe and it's branded as a universe. And I'm a person who doesn't like a lot of stress. And the first one I read out of the gate is a high-stress thriller. I'm done with your universe. So one of the things that Criterion and Saren is, we have editors and we have just-in-time readers that make sure the emotional experience is very similar. And while I can't tell you objectively this is exactly how it has to go, just be aware of that concern. And that's my biggest kind of takeaway from that is, hold the emotions, that the emotional experience, what was just talked about in the previous one, hold it congruent to the best of your ability. And so that's just a major piece. And then, go on.
Yeah, for the collaboration, one of the big things we do is managing reader expectations, and that's through the beta readers, and we have undoubtedly the best beta readers on the planet. They are very, very quick and consistent. They can say, this doesn't work, this does work. They actually told me, Terry Henry Walton Chronicles, my book 7, I wasn't sure about it. I tried a little bit different style, and I handed it to 3 of them, and all 3 came back and said, this doesn't work. One actually said, I hate it. So I took 2 days and rewrote the whole book, and that one was very well received, only because they saved me from making a mistake within the consistency of the Criterion universe and the reader expectations. The readers like to get the books very quickly because they're whale readers, they read a lot. But if you can't get it to them quickly, you have to tell them when it's coming. And so it's not a pre-order, we don't do pre-orders, but we do tell them when the book is coming, and we have to deliver. Otherwise, there's this thing with boiling Pepsi and rubber chickens and protesting in front of your house. So we prefer not to get that. So we deliver on time. When we say the book is coming this date, we may make profuse apologies if we miss that, but don't miss it by more than a week, and then you can win. So managing the reader expectations is key. It's okay. I know a lot of people here, you're working a full-time job, you're not going to write a book a month. That's perfectly fine. But let your readers know when to expect that next book and give it to them. That you manage those, otherwise you'll lose them. Hey, I'm giving you another book next month, and then 4 months later you get the book done, and don't be surprised when a lot of the readers don't come along for the ride. But if you tell them it's coming in 6 months, you'll be a lot better off.
I know that like Michael Cooper in his area, he does a lot of pre-orders. So if you do pre-orders or have questions about them, I'm going to call him out, let him answer those questions. We'll go from there. But we use it occasionally. It's really an author by author. The structure of our business is such that we look at it in each series that the author is writing is kind of a project manager for that series. And so we're there to support and to help and to do everything else. But it is a relationship in making this stuff work. It's not that we're like, okay, we've got your book, you can go off and do whatever. No, that's not what's going on. So, Chris?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what you were saying about tone and the Carthusian readers. One of the things that we try to really do in the Age of Magic is, kind of our mantra is Carthusian first, right? We bring in all these different authors with these different styles, and even Lee and I, we like to build a lot of tension, and we like to, drag people along in that. Lee likes to do like 10 to 12 pages on like old steel mill riots and things like that, and it gets a little weird. And so one of the things that we really focus upon is Carthusian readers first. And so how we do that is Lee is like the main showrunner with the writers, and then I'm like working with the writers on tone. When we came into the Carthusian world, we came in March, and it was a really good time to come in because it was like a gold rush season. Now, as we build more and more and more series with more and more and more authors, it's not like it used to, like the readers can be a little bit picky, and what we're trying to help authors that we're onboarding understand is, hey, you can knock it out of the park with this, but you're going to have to do certain things because the readers are getting some more choices about which series and now which universes they're going to be reading in. And it really is like hitting that tone, giving readers what they want, and that's the boundary of the sandbox. Within that sandbox, we can play as much as we want. And I think that that's such a key aspect of what we're doing.
Ask questions.
What's that? Question?
Does anyone have questions?
Line up over at the microphone, please.
Woo, we have two.
We have some.
Yes.
So, going off what you just said, you guys are launching like 1 million books a day. Don't you worry that you're kind of oversaturating your own market? Like, could you be equally successful not launching 1 million? Maybe 100,000 or like, something like that?
Well, Craig actually has a great response to this. What Craig would normally say to this, since he's playing around, obviously, is that how many readers are out there in urban fantasy? It's not that we're only strictly coming with our readership and we're saturating those. Certainly to a point. I mean, it's wonderful that I did whale readers in the first place because some of them like romance readers will read 2 books a day, and we're not quite there yet. So, but with it, we also go multiple genre. So while my original Bethany Ann series was cross-genre, Craig and Justin's first one were both kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian, and so that was a unique one. And then The Rise of Magic is all more fantasy. And so we actually get people who have said, I only read paranormal, but because you went into science fiction, I now read science fiction as well. And so we have a situation where we started jumping genres so that we're represented in multiple locations. We're all fishing in different areas. But I also believe that there's a massively larger audience available, and that's what we're going for. It's kind of like, I mentioned this one time, Coke one time had a business meeting, and they said, what percentage are we of the market? And the answers are coming back, we're 70%, we're 60%, we're 80%, we're 94%, and there's no growth in that. And they finally said, what percentage are we of just beverage, including milk and water? We're this big. That's our mentality. We're not massive within this. We're really tiny among the world. And so we've invested in LMBPN and going out to Frankfurt this year and starting relationships with other countries or companies in other countries and understanding translation and going, ebook market's only 4% of Brazil, and we were in Brazil with a meeting down there. So we see it, but our concept is we're only this percentage of the reading market.
We have core readership of 5,000 to 20,000 readers, and we are targeting 100,000. We want 100,000 readers with the different areas. Space opera is big, it can support that. Military science fiction can support that. We're not afraid. And that's part of our job, is to help that marketing and improve that foundation. So when you launch a book, you get those, right now, my last book launched, we had 1,000 sales in the first day. Okay, that's a good number. And we want to keep that and keep that consistency, but build that core readership so we can launch from there. When J.K. Rowling is advertising, you know you can climb higher. And since our books are all multi-genre, there's no excuse not to go find these people. We just need to find them. And that's what the rest of today is about. When we launch out of here in 5.5 minutes, you get some good people to talk about marketing.
Oh, I was going to say, could you go into a little bit of your plotting and writing and editing process if you do, say, finish a story and publish 3 days later? Because I'm afraid some people are going to think that you read the rough draft and then published it immediately.
Oh, no, yeah.
Right, so could you explain that a little bit, that process a little bit? How you guys handle it?
Oh, I've got the 8 o'clock session.
Michael Anderle tomorrow at 8 a.m. to talk about those very things, beats, arc, and story.
But the very short answer is I write 2 to 3 chapters, and because I write similar to the first session, I already know where I'm going. When I'm releasing 1, 2, and 3, that's already going to the production editors, beta readers, and everything else, and editors. So when I finish chapter 25, which is at the end, usually 2/3 of my book is already finished out through beta editing and everything else. And then we go just in time. That's where you get your 3 days. It's pretty much to them and then out. So we have 3 to 4 layers of editing and checks and beta readers and everything else before it goes out.
Can you talk briefly about the tools and hacks you use to keep the process efficient when you have multiple people working on a book or a world? Like when Martha, you were working, we're using Slack, Google Docs, emails, phone calls. Like how do you actually manage it so that you're not in useless email chains that are inefficient?
Slack, our channels are related to, like we might have let's say the Lyric Chronicles, we would have an audio for Lyric Chronicles, an editing for Lyric Chronicles, concepts for Lyric Chronicles. All these channels are in there for only the people that are relevant. If you know what Slack is, it'll make a lot more sense. And then, of course, people get to see each other, and our artists are in there, our editors are in there, our audio people are in there. So anyone that's part of this can even reach out and say, you know, Kate Rudd is one of our Audible narrators, and I've told everyone, and I hope they all know, that if you want to use Kate Rudd for yourself, you can either contact her through her website, or you can contact her through Slack, and she's going to know exactly who you're with. And there's a benefit from that. And then we use Google Docs for editing. There's a process. I think Stephen Campbell's got a podcast with Stephen Russell where we talked about it a year ago. And but yeah, Google Docs, Slack are our 2 core. And then I write in Scrivener, and it comes out of Scrivener into Google Docs.
That's actually the best part of collaborating is Slack, where we all gather together. We can cheer each other on, we can celebrate, we can share ideas and how it went. And I never had that as an author before, not like this. And the other thing that we all have in common is I can bring an idea to any one of them, and they will listen with the idea that they might change their minds. And if they express how it might go, they're actually just trying to look down the field and see where it might go wrong, but there's no ego involved. And that's super important. Yeah, it's key in collaborating, and it's also a joy to work with. And I think that's why we all reach new heights.
We're using I think all of us, or most of us, are using StoryShop now for world building. StoryShop from Sterling and Stone. It's been fabulous. I have no other attachment to them other than I like the platform. So that's been a good tool as well, keeping track of things.
I have 2 questions if we have time. The first one is, would you recommend opening like an S-Corp or something like that for collaborators to deal with payments, that kind of stuff?
I can say that it's, because Criterion and everything else is quote mine, right? Part of it is these people have to trust me. And if you ever corner Chris and Lee, you can ask them, what did their wives think whenever their first month's like, this is how much you're going to get for your piece, and they have no money in the bank. And here's your second month, and you have no money in the bank because we pay, our VPN pays within 5 business days of us receiving the money. We typically make 72 hours. So that's kind of our situation. So you're actually speaking almost like, hey, if myself and John and Michael and Lee, we all come together, we create a universe, what's going on? That's a different beast than what we do. So we have an agreement in here, and we put it in the front of our books. We said, here's the percentages we're going to get. And if I sell the movie rights, guess what? Your percentage is the same. If I go and sell Radio Zimbabwe rights, your percentage is the same. You will wake up and I will tell you, you've made this much money. Because LMBPN as a corporation is focused on trying to get our intellectual property to more markets, and that's part of what we're doing behind the scenes. So we have 109 books today, but we'll probably be at 200 by summer. And then we'll, just keep going. So we're a little bit of a different beast than some of the other collaborations that I think your question might be going towards. And do we have an IP?
Yes, Matt Sampson is here.
Yeah, so there's like...
Yeah, Matt Sampson is here as an IP attorney to talk about that, but only one person can publish. So that's where your limitation lies. And only one bank account will receive those funds. So if you establish an LLC with 4 members, you have to establish that account under that, and then that's how that would work. And we have contracts. We all sign contracts with each other, so it's all laid out. It's fairly simplistic, but as a lawyer, I looked at it, and I think I'm an idiot, but anyway, it looked good to me. The breakout was good, and it's real straightforward. It's Michael controls his Cartharian IP, but we share the copyrights of that book, of each individual book that we write.
The goal being that if something were to happen, that bus that kills everybody hits me too. Then I want to make sure that if anyone ever takes the IP from any of the other stuff, and they try if they try to hurt the other individuals, then Chris and Lee have a way to sue because their name is in that book. So they have a right to do that. So that is set up that way. Stephen Campbell, the operations guru for what we do, I've made the comment before, if you ever want to know just kind of what our contracts look like, just reach out to him. We're very open with what we do. And we'll take some names out or something, but the same core concept is there if you'd like to take a look at it.
Okay, is there time for another?
No.
All right, if you have other questions, here we are. You know what we look like. Find us on break, find us at lunch. No, we're done.
A year ago, when somebody stood up here and said, I'll stay as long as any of you have questions, just remember, only 3 people bothered, only 1 stayed in touch, and that one's up here on stage, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Next up will be Chris Fox. And also, I believe, what do we have next? We have a breakout session with Joe Solari.